Hello and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, my good friend Jim Stam. How you doing, brother?
Doing good, man. We got Paul Skenes pitching this Saturday, and our guest might have a couple anecdotes about facing some tough pitching over the years too. So,
sometimes you get lucky and the universe kind of does things for you. So we just get this Paul Skenes news, and it's really cool timing that we have scheduled another Pirates first round selection, Chad Hermansen, on the show. And Chad, we really appreciate you taking the time with us here. We really value your experience both on and off the field, and we are going to pick your brain for a minute here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. This is pretty cool.
Before we get into our talk, Jim, I think we should probably tell everybody we're going to get to the Skenes stuff at the end. We're going to do all that appropriate appreciation of this moment and everything. I don't want to put Chad through that. He's not following the Pirates every single day. We want his experience. You know what I mean?
Gary,
we want to talk to him about his stuff.
He deals with mental health. He can't deal with the Pirates at the same time. Yeah, I mean, so there's got to be a separation there.
It could be argued that doing what we do, we're dealing with mental health too for Pirates fans. We're
gonna schedule a session with him right after this, probably.
Right. So let's get a little bit of let's get a little bit of the background out of the way, because I do have to check myself sometimes and realize how old I am, that I may be outdating some people, and some people are like, who's Chad Hermansen? Well, Chad Hermansen was the Pirates' first round selection in 1995 in the, at the time, June amateur draft, the 10th overall out of Henderson, Nevada. Debuted September of 1999, a couple days before turning 2022. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what's it like, man, being 17 years old, you get picked, and you're immediately thrown on a short season team?
Yeah, it was surreal. Obviously, I'm in Las Vegas, and you get drafted by the Pirates, and you're obviously, okay, we need you in Bradenton, Florida in 3 days, and still 17 years old. So I was actually really excited about it. I had some advice throughout the year. You're like, well, or do you want to go to college? Do you want to go to the professional ranks and all that stuff? And, school was definitely on the afterburner for me. And I was like, no, I want to be a professional player. I want to go play baseball right away. And so that was a very easy decision for me, and started out in rookie ball right in Bradenton, Florida, like most of the high school players do. And you get down there real quickly. And I'd been to Florida before. I committed to University of Miami. So I was like, I guess I'll fly across the country anyway, regardless. And so being from the desert in the West, going to the South in Florida, it was definitely, and living out there for a while, it was like, man, this is pro ball, right? It was pretty brutal to wake up early in the morning, do your early morning routine, and go eat lunch, and then go back out and play that 1 o'clock game. But it was exciting. It was exhausting and exciting all at the same time. And then played pretty well, for the first couple of weeks, and then got moved up to, and they kind of told me, they're like, hey, you want to try to get out of here as quickly as you can, because it's Florida, right. It's rookie ball, it's rough. Once you can get up to short season, now you get into the regular schedule, right? So the 7 p.m. game, more of the regular routine of being a professional player. And so got up to short season Erie, within a couple weeks after I signed with the Pirates, and that was a blast, right? So Scott Little was my first manager. In fact, I remember my very first game in Erie, I was hitting behind Jose Guillen. Had no clue who he was, at the time. And he hits in his first at bat an opposite field home run that hits the foul pole in right field. And that's pretty rare, in my short little, so far career, to see a guy drive a ball the opposite field like that. And just to hear the loud crack, I'm like, okay, this is big time right here. And so that was kind of my first experience of hearing a ball get really hit hard like that. And so Obviously, Jose Guillen continued to go up and do things he did. And but yeah, I mean, that was just the beginning, right, of the professional career.
Right. And you kind of had power the whole time. And it really, really popped like in 1998 in AAA, right? Everything really kind of came together there, and you were just hammering baseball. You said you made a little bit of a swing change there that kind of like got you hitting more home runs. I wondered if you could talk about what brought on that swing change in AAA that kind of made you think like you needed to add something, because this was before the days where launch angle was shoved down everyone's throat.
Well, I would say, like, to be like frank, nobody really talked to me or messed with me hitting wise up until probably after my first year in AAA. So I guess because I had my success, I was hitting, I don't know, 20 home runs a year. I think my first full year was Augusta and Lynchburg. So what was that, low A and high A combined? I think I hit like 24 home runs. So 20 in AA and then 28 in AAA my first year. So things were going well. Like those power numbers were showing up. And then after obviously, of course, being young and playing at that level, hitting home runs, having some power, like the game provides with young players, you're going to strike out a lot too.
Sure, yeah.
You're trying to learn pitch discipline, really the game and the velocity of everything, and you're seeing very good breaking pitches now every day. So it's just different from being in high school, right? So you're continually making those adjustments and just learning how to become a good hitter. So mechanically, I would say that was just my natural swing, right? You know, kind of going through that. And then a coach mentioned to me after I guess it would have been my first year in AAA. Hey, great season, congratulate me on that, but hey, you're getting better, doing all these things. We need you to cut down more on the strikeouts, and we have noticed that you have a little bit of an uphill swing, you know, and it's usually as kind of my scout eyes, like when you're watching a player from the side and say they take a high pitch, and you see that front arm leak up, right. Call it a chicken wing, or that arm's kind of leading up here and you taking that pitch. But those are like all the terms you kind of learn in pro ball. And so once you kind of so they're like, hey, we need you to kind of shorten that up. You might have to start thinking differently. So the problem was it wasn't told to me like what to do. Just like, hey, you might have to think more down and through the ball.
Okay.
Maybe backspin the ball. So in hitting terms, that basically, as a hitter, you talk about being direct to the ball, being on plane, with the ball or with the pitch. I do hitting now today. So I talk about that a little bit with some of the older hitters, not necessarily younger hitters, but you're trying to give yourself the best chance possible to make contact with the pitch, and where your bat can get into the zone quickly, but then stay in the zone, kind of in the middle of your body to out front as long as possible. But those things they didn't really talk about those things, right?
Right.
Especially not today, the way they talk about it today. So the idea or the answer was, well, let's just think about maybe backspinning the ball, which is more of a feel for me was the opposite of swinging. And I didn't think I swung up. It was just more of that was the arc of the swing. Let's think a little bit more down, like down and through the ball. And so that's what I did. I really worked on that hard that off season. And that it worked for me. I ended up, at least my numbers dictate that. So that second year in AAA, I did even better. I think 32 home runs or something like that. And warranted my first call up to the big leagues at that point.
I mean, you couldn't possibly have a better time to take a break than right then. And the YouTube gods demand a break around 8 minutes. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. We'll come right back.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. I should say, Jim didn't just disappear and I didn't notice. He just disappeared. He's coming back. He's trying to figure out technology. Again, another struggle of our age, but we're just getting to the point where you get your call up, Chad, and you've described before. I mean, it's not a trade secret that they tried to make some tweaks with you as soon as you got there, pretty much. 2 days into your call up, there they were making some changes, right? And you said before they didn't explain it all that well to you. They kind of just said fix it. So I wanted to ask you, like, what kind of resources did a kid have at that time if that's all they were getting from their hitting coach and they really needed a little bit more explanation about what was being attempted, what you were trying to achieve? Because you were humming before you came up. It was shocking. I mean, again, I stressed before, I'm the exact same age as you.
Mm-hmm.
I identified with you. You were like, you were going to be the guy that came up that was my age that I followed for a while. So I was very invested. I even went up to Erie to watch you play.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, like, it was shocking to everybody to see the different results. And then years later to hear you kind of tell those stories, I can't even imagine what that was like for somebody that was already succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, and it's weird. I mean, it seems like so long ago now, and I've always, anytime someone's invited me on a podcast or to talk about it, the hardest part for me is, at the time when I'm 21 years old and I'm in the big league. So number one, I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm trying to be positive, but I'm also a little scared. Right. There's some fear of failing, and you're playing against guys that you see on TV. Oh my gosh, there's Greg Maddux, or there's all these names that you see. And so that I was kind of my first call, my first day in the big leagues was like probably one of my most confident days. And then it kind of just in a way felt like it was somewhat, I guess I allowed it to be shattered with like just that one event, right. Coach kind of saying, hey, we need to do some things and you need to switch this now. And it was more of kind of like the wording of, hey, you can't hit like that here. Like you got away with that in AAA, like that's fine and dandy, but this is a whole different level. And that might be true, right? That's probably true. But at the same time, I think logically it's one of those things where like, well, it's kind of like when you draft a player, a lot of teams they'll draft a player, they'll send them to rookie ball, and they don't mess with them at all. They give them there's a minimum of bats, like 50, it could be 100, depends on the organization. Let's see what we drafted. Let's see what we got here until we tinker or mess with anything, right? Yeah, and then is he getting results? Is he just sucking right away? Is he striking out every at bat? Right. So then you actually see it firsthand with your eyes and everything. Then you start making adjustments. So those are things that I thought of later on. I'm like, why did that happen? Type thing. But I was always taught to be very coachable. Listen to your coaches. So I was kind of a 21-year-old. Yes, sir. I'll do whatever you tell me to do kind of guy.
Yeah. Right.
I want to be a part of that organization, do the right things, and just be a good dude that's coachable and wants to do whatever is possible to help win. Right.
And I think that happens to a lot of kids. I watch somebody like, we have somebody in our organization right now that reminds me a lot of your career path, actually, so far. Nick Gonzalez, a lot of power, was drafted with a lot of power, had a little bit of a strikeout problem, a little bit of a launch angle problem, a little bit of a hole in his
scouted Nick. I know all about Nick.
Okay. Well, yeah, actually, he would have been out in the Arizona area, right?
Yeah, he was at New Mexico State.
Right.
Yeah, he was killing it out there.
So, when he got drafted here, there was a lot of talk that, his power might not be real because of the altitude there. Right. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people had issues with that selection and everything. Yeah. I think a lot of the concerns, you're still kind of seeing them, but it's time to get him back up here and kind of see if he can try it out. I guess it's just a different environment as far as what they're looking for. So from your scouting perspective, how has analytics changed that? Is it as much you're standing there watching guys and like just observing and thinking their skill, how does their skill translate?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're reading RPMs and bat speed models, and
yeah, no doubt. It, like, as a former player, that drove me nuts, to be frank with you. I scouted for 8 years. So with the Angels is where I scouted with. And I definitely started to notice the analytics becoming a bigger thing as time went on. And because you started to see the scouts, especially like there's scouts that are former players, right? And then there's scouts that really didn't play. Maybe they played some high school ball, and a lot of them didn't play at all, right? So they're
Right.
kind of you could kind of like they've learned from YouTube, you know.
they're almost journalists in a way.
Yes,
they know the right questions to ask. They know the right way to write down
they're
the information.
subscribed to all the websites, and so they look at, well, what does Baseball America think or Perfect Game think? And here's my ranking, so I'm going to go scout based off of that. So they don't know instinctually what a good player looks like. You know, what is it? You know, at least I'm kind of speaking in generalities here, but that was really annoying for a guy like myself, and then the older scouts. And you would see those guys just pass people up organizationally. You know, you're like, that's kind of how the world works a little bit, right? But analytically, you know, then you start to kind of realize, okay, this is part of the package, right? There's the physical side, there's the tools, there's the numbers, there's the analytics. So you have to kind of marry both of them and just understand that that's part of the package, right? We have to include
right.
it.
And depending on what organization you're in, they probably value it more or less, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And so when I was with the Angels, that was definitely a sticking point. And you know, as scouts,
well, geez, you had to know, Chad, if you drafted somebody there, he was getting called up the next year. They don't even put their guys in the minors.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone's so different. It's kind of fascinating, right, to watch that part of it.
It is.
And but yeah, like Nick Gonzalez, right? I loved Nick Gonzalez. But that was a fact. Like, you kind of looked at the history, and if I remember correctly, you know, was barely even offered a scholarship out of high school. You know, he's kind of a smaller guy, probably wasn't very physical at the time. So he's the kind of guy that, like, yeah, you go to like a junior college, you go to a lower level, you know, D2, D1 or whatever it is. But, and he became that, right? But yes, you go to New Mexico State, I saw 10 home runs hit in 3 innings at that place one time. It's a joke for sure. But he was still a good hitter, right?
Yes.
And then you still saw that. You saw that he was adequate enough to play in spots. You're like, yeah, he's probably second base. Is he playing second now? Is that where he's
mostly second? He can play a little bit of short and third too. And he's a bat speed demon. That's what he is, you know. And if he's got the bat speed, I guess the hope was that he could have the time to adjust to the curveball. That just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's like, and that's, you know, we all want it straight, right?
Yeah, right. Everybody's got a little Serrano in them, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
totally. Absolutely.
So I guess we should get to Call Your Shot. Jim is working his way back. His computer restarted completely. But Call Your Shot's a pretty interesting question. I think it's the next one I want to ask anyway. All right, Call Your Shot is brought to you by our friends over at Shop Yins. Go over to Shop Yins, search all of their Yinsy stuff that they have over there. It's really cool, fun, black and gold themed, every single team represented. Good stuff. This week it is Nick Camuso, our buddy on Twitter, and he wants to know something pretty simple from you, Chad. How did you feel about the walk on water comment? Assuming you are aware of it. And did it affect you at all?
That's funny. It's a great question. I was 17 when that happened. So the story behind that, I think I was like 6 for 7, my first, or 7 for 8, my first 2 games. Home run, a couple doubles and stuff like that. And just was kind of lights out for 2 games. And even my teammates were like, what is happening here? Like, and they're like, well, I guess that's what a first round pick looks like, you know, kind of just joking with me, having fun with it. And, but Woody Heike, if it was the manager there, kind of an older guy that's been there for a long time. And he treated me very, very well. He was kind of hard on me, which is great, but treated me pretty well. And then that comes out, I think it was like Baseball America. And my wife and I kind of joke about it. Like, well, you're kind of doomed from there, aren't you? It's like, you live up to that. I would admit completely. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, really? Like, why? This is really lame. Because as obviously and a believer, a Christian kind of guy, that I was like, oh, we don't want to go there, dude. That's
I
so
can't imagine.
I try to joke about it, really, but I don't know how else to look at that. But I was 17, and came in, and it was the Pirates, right? So they're kind of they kind of struggled with some first round picks and some just guys that hadn't panned out, and so I guess he saw something that he hadn't seen in a little while or something. I don't know, but I think we can all laugh about that. It's kind of ridiculous.
It was,
or is ridiculous.
I mean, it was, but I mean, is it any different than everybody that gets drafted today in the first round is the GOAT? I mean, like,
well, I know we were talking about Paul Skenes later on here, but it is, it's a whole different era now with social media, right? With some of these guys, I work with kids, here in Las Vegas, that they already have their own like social media pages in their 10, right? And it's just kind of this whole, they're kind of, I call it, they're playing the game, right? They're playing the social media game. Like, are you trying to be famous, or are you just trying to be a good baseball player and do your thing? And that's where the parents come in.
It's created this whole underbelly I would say, I mean, I'm part of it. I have my own website. I write about the Pirates and everything. And, we all consider ourselves, reasonably connected to certain players and whatnot. We talk to different minor leaguers on their way up, and when they become big leaguers, we're still friends with them and everything. So you have your reasonable ins with people. It's not like who's getting traded where or anything, but you start to know guys. A lot of them, I think you're starting to see disconnect themselves from social media altogether. And that was something I did want to bring up with you. If social media existed, you were somebody that already kind of was struggling a little bit mentally, right? I mean, what would social media have done to you? I mean, would it have made it worse, or given you an outlet?
Yeah, what I could compare it to would be, I think back then there might have just been chat rooms, so like think of 99, early 2000s.
Yeah, AOL.
Yeah, right. AOL and kind of early chat rooms. And I just remember a couple times, like, because in your mind, you're like, don't do it, right? Don't go looking into, don't dive into it. And then you go in and you just see like person after person just blowing you up, right? Oh, yeah. Just like, he's not ready, all these things. And when you're young, you don't know how to handle the kind of all that stuff. I mean, it can take you down a whole deep hole basically. And really start to your self-doubt, your confidence, and your, so it just takes you in a wrong spot in a space you don't really want to go into. So, but yeah, social media compared now, right? If you do have accounts and stuff, I could totally see why you wouldn't have that and why you wouldn't go down that route. But then there's some that they handle that a whole different way. They sincerely don't give a crap what other people think of them. They don't try to be politically correct or do their thing, and they seem to kind of get away with it, and it works for them, right?
I'd have to say that largely depends on how the talent's translating, doesn't it? Because
how well you playing, right?
People will put up with an awful lot from you if they need you real bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think Trevor Bauer is probably a pretty good example of that, right? Where have this huge presence online, all this stuff, and I think players, I'm just speculating, I'm guessing here, but I'm assuming players that are extremely focused on what they're doing with their job, like their task and their craft, and really want to win and keep that focus there, that that's a whole distraction, right? And allowing something like that to come in the clubhouse, and I would have to imagine players have gone to, like, it seems like you see players going to like front office people more and more these days of like, hey, we don't want this guy here type thing. And, or them going to like the leaders of the team and actually asking those questions. Hey, do we want to bring a guy like that in here?
Yeah.
And that's probably a big part of it in his case, is my guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been cases, and I mean, the Pirates actually, oddly enough, we have a decent list of those types that have run into some trouble. I think we're giving Guermon a chance, in I think the Florida Coast League right now is where they have him,
Okay.
and Aroldis Chapman, obvious, lots
Yep.
of things going on there. G1 Bay's got a history, so yeah, we've got a list of guys that have made some dicey decisions and hopefully are turning things around.
Yeah,
But
sure.
there's some, I don't know, there's no turning around from it, especially if they're still active,
Right. Totally. Yep.
So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was some of the players that you came up with, because there really wasn't an awful lot of veteran leadership on that team, right? So is that something that we fans overblow? Or is it something that really is important? Because I look at the list here and, like, Jason Kendall was a child, like, so it's not like he had been around for a long time. Maybe talent wise he was established, but
Right.
the team itself, a lot of kids. I mean, who did you gravitate to?
Right, that's a great question. People my age, right?
Yeah, right.
So Craig Wilson's probably one of my best friends, probably maybe the one I definitely keep in contact with the most. So we're all the same age. So Craig Wilson, Jack Wilson, pitchers and position players, they kind of do their own thing. Like sometimes there's that separation, but I mean, I can just only speak for myself regarding that, and the because at that time it was struggling so much, always kind of the bottom of the division. I kind of felt like the leadership definitely lacked. The communication sucked for sure. From my perspective with coaches, that was kind of non-existent in a way. And maybe that was just, I didn't know any better.
I'm trying to think of who you had. You had Lloyd McClendon as a hitting coach. Was it Gene Lamont?
Yeah, I came up with Gene Lamont.
Okay.
That was a pretty, because he was what was that? He was there in 99 and then 2000. And then I think McClendon came in 01, if I'm not mistaken. With Lamont, very, very limited contact.
I think that's the impression most of us had. Yeah. There was very little being done there.
I kind of remember Al Martin I loved Al Martin. I wish I had a chance to play with him more, because I thought when I came up, like, he was kind of the guy I wanted to be around, and like I took a liking to him, like, as a leadership guy kind of guy. But I didn't get a chance to play with him because he's like, dude, you're going to take my spot, so I'll be out of here. But yeah, after that, it I don't know, man. I don't know if it's because the way, if it was, you have to look at it from the top down, right? From the coaching staff or the manager down, and what kind of culture are you creating? You're right. Kendall was the guy, right? He was, but also very, I guess he was just more old school. He's going to show up every day to play. He was just more of a hard-nosed kind of guy, meaning, he didn't really say a whole lot, I guess you could say. And so, I didn't really see that when I was there. Played in some other organizations it was very short-lived with those. Like, I went to the Cubs, the Dodgers, and there were superstars on those teams, right?
Right.
Also,
that was you came up right in the steroid era. So
I went to the Cubs and Sammy Sosa's there, right?
Yeah. So what was that like too? Because you're a power hitter, and I'll make an assumption here that you didn't use, but
I did not.
What I mean?
No, I was competing against dudes that showed up, 30 pounds heavier in spring training. You're kind of like, what is happening there, right? And
so what's that dynamic like in a locker room? Because you're not the only one noticing that. Everybody is. So.
Honestly, I never had a conversation with anybody. I don't know if because I was just young and dumb and maybe naive, but it was also like, man, like, but it was kind of those things where you're like, okay, I thought I worked pretty hard. Like, I got after it. I gained 8 pounds.
Yeah, right.
And I was kind of a skinny, wiry guy anyway, so I had a really hard time just holding my weight,
right,
know. Yeah. But then you'd see guys that would show up, and you're like, wow, dude, like, I hired a personal trainer and I did these things and that, and I'm like, wow, dude, like good for you. Then you kind of, it was more after the fact, it was like, oh, I see what happened there. Right.
I think as a fan, that's kind of what it was too. Like it was like, I guess it was going on for a while. And then I felt like we just looked up and all of a sudden this home run thing's going on and people are starting to chatter about what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, then guys didn't hit home runs in the minor leagues at all. Then all of a sudden they're hitting home runs and
right.
They became a better hitter. Right. It was
so
they figured it out.
I guess I can't imagine how that would feel. Like you're a kid that, you just hit 32 home runs and you're up in the majors and you're hitting like 11 and you're struggling and you're doing the best you can and you're playing next to guys that you're watching spring to spring double their size, or add 35 pounds of mass over the off season. And once that broke, your career had already kind of ended as far as, pursuing baseball as a career, at least playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any sour grapes, or would you have made any different choices if you knew?
No, I don't look back at that. And I don't know, man, not to get all cheesy, but like my, I guess, personal values or way superseded any of that. I have 4 kids, so I can't even imagine like my son, for example, that played up until, junior college, be like, hey dad, did you use steroids? Yeah, son, I used them for 8 years, and that's what,
right.
And that might sound cheesy or, kind of, I don't know, hooky or whatever, but no, I never even entertained it. All my buddies are like, bro, why didn't you do it? like it would have been worth it, right? To just have that one good year and set yourself up for life with an incredible contract. But I don't know, man. I'm in Las Vegas. There's a lot of guys out here in Vegas, and I'm not going to name any names or anything, but I see guys now that definitely were in that boat, and they are looking bad.
Right.
They're out of shape, or not out of shape, but you could tell they're beaten up. Like, how people look like they've abused things in the past.
Right.
So I'm seeing the long, that I'm a little bit older now, and I'm okay with that, right? It is what it is, and I would rather look at myself in the mirror every day, right, and said, hey, I didn't cheat to do that, to try to be like that's just not the way I was raised. That's not within myself as I guess just my personal character and values. So I'm totally okay with that.
Well, everybody, Jim is back, and he's going to have to take a guess as to whether I've already talked about what he wants to talk about.
Let me tell you, the computer restart with 0 warning, that is messed up. The last 20 minutes, I have made up swear words. Thank God my son is in school, because this is not ideal. Let's just put it that way. So I'm happy to jump back in wherever, guys. Well,
we learned basically his journey up to and I would say debut, and then Pirates tweaking him a little bit, got into his scouting a little bit. Haven't talked much about his mental edge coaching quite yet.
Okay. Well, let me just. I think this ties into it, Chad. Like, tell me about like the jump to the majors, right, from minor league ball. Do fans tend to underestimate just still how big of a jump that is for players? Do you find that to be the case, or your experience and what others have, you guys, if you talk to other players?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's a whole different level of pressure, right? Where you're not on TV, right? There's I guess depending on where you go now too, like there's if you thought like, okay, 10,000 fans at a game was a big deal, and all of a sudden now there's 40, or 50,000, like, what do you make that mean essentially in your own mind? So if you have any, I guess, lack of confidence in certain parts of your game, like that might escalate a little bit. You might think about that a little bit more internally, but yeah, I mean, there's something to say about, they called it, up to AAA, and then the big leagues is 4A. players would kind of talk about that. Yeah, I think it's a different level. It's a different level of consistency, a different level of belief, right, in yourself as a person and as a player. And I think that goes a long way to, your performance on the field. So, I think it's internally within yourself. Like, what do you make it mean that you're in the big leagues? And are pitchers better? Do hitters have more power? The tools, you kind of say, like, a lot of guys have the same tools in AAA. That might be true, but there's a lot of guys that that get to AAA, and then you could really tell, like, yeah, they just don't have that next level tool to get them to the big leagues. So there's a whole different set of freakiness,
right?
I would say of an athlete at that next level.
And when you were scouting, did you ever bang the table for somebody that they didn't take, and you can still hold it over their head today?
Oh man, that's a good question, because they're definitely. I had to learn over time, because when you scout your area, you're a little, probably, at least you're kind of biased to your area, and especially if you haven't gone and done any like national event and seen, like, okay, like, who are the top shortstops, who are the top pitchers, like, my guy's better than your guy, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then you try to get to where you're like, okay, no, this is an organizational thing. We want to make sure we get the right guy, the right pick. I'm trying to think in my. So to answer your question, that doesn't really happen anymore, I guess, in my experience. You as a scout, you just kind of, they would give you a minute to talk about your player, especially like right up before the draft. You might have that meeting that's kind of halfway in the season or 3/4, in the season. You kind of have that, hey, let's check in and see where we're at. And we're kind of getting our players aligned, and you might have a little bit more time, but it's a smaller setting, just maybe the scouting director and the cross checkers. But then when you get to that meeting a little bit before the draft, or literally a day or two before, and everyone's in the room, you get like a minute. And it's kind of almost, it's a non-emotional thing. Like, here's this player, here's what he does, da 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 da. If you start talking about how amazing he is and all these things, that's like, okay, stop. Like, that's what it felt like anyway, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but
they just wanted the facts, and that's it.
Give you the facts, which is cool, right? Because then maybe you leave the emotions out of it, and your personal passion, right, for that player, and like, well, he's the best shortstop I've seen since so and so. But I meant, like you mentioned, Nick Gonzalez. I really love Nick. Kevin Newman was my top offensive guy. His draft year, I really liked him. I kind of likened him to a guy less power than like a Jay Bell. If you related that to Pirates shortstop guy.
Well, I mean, I'll give you that one. You nailed that. Less power than Jay Bell.
Yeah, sure. yeah. But could hit, right? But then you're like, his dominance in college, does that translate to? And he's close to having. He's already been in the big leagues 6-7 years now, I think. But
I actually don't know where he is right now.
I want to say I just saw him. I think it's the Reds.
He was with Cincinnati last year. I think he's with
the Diamondbacks, I think, now.
Okay.
So I don't pay a big attention to it, but I actually in the facility I do my hitting lessons out of. I just saw him 2 days ago hitting there.
Go ahead, Jim.
Chad, let me ask you something, because I do think it's going to tie into something that we do want to get to with you. Is I was listening to something the other day from Sean Casey, okay?
Yep.
And he was talking about like that mental approach that you have to have at the plate or whatever's coming up, that like you stay singularly focused on that pitch, that at bat. You can't come up thinking about bases loaded, I got to get a hit here, those types of things, letting it get bigger than that situation, that you start putting all these pressures on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that guys are always pushing back against that, even at the big league level, what was your experience, and does that tie into kind of a little bit what you do now with just trying to get, kids and also parents to realize, like, take it very, very in very the littlest chunks you can. Don't try to think about all that external stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because that falls kind of in the line of, well, what can I control in this moment, right? So on that note, like I never really had those thoughts, like I got to get a hit in the minor leagues, but those thoughts started showing up in Pittsburgh, right? It's just a big moment. Like I got to show like why I was picked where I was, right? So that's where I can speak for myself. That's where
Right.
those thoughts started to come into play. And when you start making at bats mean like this, like your life is on the line.
Yeah,
right?
it's way more than just the at bat or the pitch, right?
It changes everything, because now you're like in this, the fight or flight mode. You're in kind of, you probably flight in a way where you are fighting for your at bat, but you make it mean this whole thing. So you're probably gripping the bat a little bit harder than you usually do. Your muscles are tensing up. You tend to make your swing, decision a little bit earlier, so which makes you more susceptible to breaking balls, right? So you're gonna kind of try to get out there a little bit quicker. You're more jumpy, and so when you understand, because kind of when you're in that, you kind of get it. You're like, man, why was I so jumpy there? And unless you kind of sit there and with your own personal awareness recognize that, you're like, oh man, where did the feeling of this anxiousness, like this overly desire to want to succeed so bad, where did that come from? And it all stems from your thoughts, right? With what are you making this certain situation mean? And so your thoughts just start, if you can't control, it's hard to control your thoughts, right? But if you're not aware of them, you're like, oh man, I got to get a hit. Because when you say I got to get a hit, that's going to likely bring on a feeling of anxiousness, right? And maybe even nervousness. And when you are in that feeling, when you're in that emotion, that's going to create like the action of jumpiness and jumping out, so it creates the action, right? So when you're in that mode, it's really hard as a hitter, which coach are like, hey man, you got to relax. You got to like just chill.
Take a breath.
Let it come to you. Like, and when you're in the minor leagues, you're like, this is the minor leagues, dude. This is not that big of a deal. And so
Pirates Queen Banshee says can be applied to daily life. So
yeah, 100%, right? So I think before like the overwhelm, right? The overwhelm of that feeling and that emotion, and as coaches and stuff, we tell, well, forget your emotions and stuff, that would be fantastic if we could, but we're human. And so all those play the factor in everything. And so that's part of kind of what I do with coaching is, so what I experienced in the big leagues is what that 12-year-old experiences in that Little League All-Star game, in that big at bat, when he's saying the same things, like, I got to get a hit here. I want to get this hit to get my team to that regional, and I want to go play in the Little League World Series. I'm just kind of making that up. But yeah, that's where you get kind of stuck, right, in the mental portion of it, and you're just making it mean this huge deal in that moment.
That little leaguer probably has a more animated coach than Gene Lamont too. So, I mean, I would say that probably makes some sense. But
I think that might be a safe bet. But
so, I mean, you have transitioned into the mental training and actually instructing hitting at the same time. Do you find it hard to separate the two? I mean, like somebody hires you for a hitting lesson, you're giving the hitting lesson. You probably have a hard time not going like, I know this is a different thing I do, but it applies. I have to talk about it right here.
Yeah. I mean, you can, and that's kind of the skill of being a coach, right? Of like, when's the right time to give a kid information? And I think that's a whole skill in of itself. Because if you've ever been an athlete and you're really struggling in the moment and you're definitely in your head and you're pissed off and you're angry, anytime a coach tells you something at that moment, you're like, get the crap out of my face, right? Like, I don't want to hear any, because you're just not willing to receive information. So as a coach, you need to recognize that, and like, when's the right time for that? So I literally just had a lesson like 3 days ago of a 12-year-old that came in. And this kid is like plays club ball on one of the top teams in town. And the tee work, he was straight swinging uphill, hitting the top of the cage, like on all his swings. So his swing path was horrendous, right? Just uppercutting everything. And then I go into flips, just front flips. Like, let's see where we're at. He literally missed the first 5. And that's pretty rare, right? For a kid that has some skill to miss completely. And after the third one, he was done. Like, he was so mad and angry. And the mom's like, this is what happens every time, right? She's like, every time he does one thing wrong, he's just done. So he was just so caught up and stuck in the emotion of it that he hasn't recognized how to or have the tools to help him in that specific spot. So yes, to answer that question, there is you in a way have to separate some of that, where that might be a Zoom call like this or a call. So that's why I do both.
Very cool.
Tell me real quick, Chad. I don't know if you guys touched on this. I want to just bring it back to like your experience in general. And then, I know there's a big baseball fraternity, right? And I'm sure you talk to a lot of guys that have played and had different levels of success and whatnot. But when it comes down, the big argument that seems to be on social media is kind of like the development versus the responsibility on the player to perform. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what I'm getting at it is, at the end of the day, when you look back on it all, do you find other players talking more about either I didn't get it done, or boy, the coaching, the development system that I was in really screwed me? Because that is something that I don't even know if it can be successfully argued either way. It's just that's always coming up on, and the Pirates have had a lot of problems with development. Mm. So I just want you to give a peek into that and tell me your thoughts.
That's a great question. And I think it's a little bit probably of both, right? For me, I can speak to myself. For me, it took, I knew like when the whole like swing change, happened, it messed with me more mentally than the physical portion of it. Because after a while, and it was after I'd kind of been sent up and down a few times, I'm like, well, none of this is working. Right. So when you're kind of given information from a coach, and I truly believe that any coach is trying to help a player.
Right.
That coach sees something that's like, hey, and you're kind of just giving options. Say with a hitter, you're giving options like, we could try this, we could try that. Which I think is the right approach, but also giving the player a say in what the coach is. And that's where I felt like there's lack of communication, meaning, hey, I'm the coach. I'm seeing this and this. Are you noticing that, when you're swinging or, so there's some feedback and communication there. Like, yeah, I'm definitely noticing that. Okay, cool. Maybe we could try this. Right. And so it's more of a conjoined team thing. And you're still giving
it's collaborative more than just.
When a coach, that's the thing with professional coaching, is when you tell someone, hey, you need to do it that way, in a way, now you're putting, as a coach, the responsibility of the success and the results on the coach. Because like, hey, I told you to do that and you did it, but you failed. So now, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of on the coach in a way, because the athlete was like, well, dude, you told me to do it that way. That didn't work. What the hell? Right. Did you tell me wrong information? So that's definitely lacking, I think. And that's where I think coaches, and maybe it's way different now. I have no idea what development's like. And I think that's any, like, people that talk or work with coaches in general, like life coaches and different kinds of people. Who am I to know exactly what you need or want in that moment? You know what you need and want. I can help you possibly get there, but let's find a way to get there together, and let's do it cohesively, right?
Yeah, because I can imagine it at that age, and you're in that situation as a young player. You don't want to be put in a position where you're not doing what they're asking you to do, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to be seen as the guy who's, oh, he's not going to listen to anything anybody says. But at the same time, you have your own, career to worry about too. So I would imagine it puts younger guys in some really difficult spots, or that it has.
Well, I think you were not on here, but one of my best friends is Craig Wilson. So we're the same age, drafted the same year. And this is a long time ago, right? This is like in the 2000s. So without naming names, but when you have a coach say to you, hey, if you don't do this and do it my way, you will be sent down. Right. So that's like a threat to me. And that's brutal. That's such horse crap coaching that it's ridiculous. Right. So that's your ego, your power trip of what your position is. And that's what, like, behind the scenes people don't know sometimes happens. I don't know if that happens.
No, but amplify that, because I mean, I just got done telling you that we still talk to minor league players and everything, right?
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of these guys, they feel overwhelmed with analytics information that they had never even seen before they got called up. What's at the major league level is a lot different than what's at the minor league level as far as that pitch by pitch stuff. It's getting better, but that's relatively new that you're starting to get to that point where everybody has it all the way up. And you get told one thing at the major league level, and then you go back to the minor league level, and that hitting coach is telling you a little bit of a different spin on that, right?
Yeah.
But in the back of your head, okay, I don't want to do this though, because when I get back up there, so how do you balance that as a player? Because you're trying to make your current coach happy.
Is if you think of baseball's not hard enough in general, right? Like, we got.
Yeah. And to kind of finish to answer your question too, right? So for myself, and again, I can just speak from my experience, but you can imagine I still talked to hitting coaches and still kind of asked questions, but none of them really like changed things after that. It was just more of, it was definitely more, hey, you figure it out, right? And so that does bring back the responsibility of the athlete, of the player. Like, the player should know himself more than anybody, especially at that level. Yeah. Even though I'm 21 and I still don't, there's so much you don't know about the game. It's ridiculous. You're just like, yeah, I just happen to be pretty good up until my whole amateur career. And all of a sudden I'm in the big leagues. I don't know crap. Right. Especially like, yeah, I can hit fastballs pretty well. And I kind of struggle against breaking balls, so you're trying to figure yourself out. And that's where the work comes in. Right. So if you struggle against breaking balls, well, are you, I don't even remember working on breaking balls, or we didn't have the machines.
Yeah.
Of let's go practice curveball day, before.
And you were lucky on your schedule if you faced 2-3 guys a week that could throw curveballs like that, right? I mean,
nobody ever threw curveballs in BP, right? That was not a thing that I ever remember. But so that would have been more machine work. But so nowadays we have.
I meant more in the AAA games. Like, you're not facing the guys that have that kind of stuff all the time, like you are in the majors.
Probably not in the. Yeah, correct. Yeah, there's your 1, 2, 3, and 4 starter, if you're playing like a 4-game series, is not going to be the same as it is in your starters in the big leagues, for sure.
And that's why there's always, no matter how good you are, there's always something you're going to have to learn at the next level. Paul Skenes is about to find that out too at some point. So will Jared Jones one day, believe it or not, guys.
Yeah.
Jim, anything else you got for Chad before we move on to our little Paul Skenes talk?
Yeah, one more thing, Chad, and this stuck out to me, and it was a previous interview you did, and you had mentioned about, like, if I only knew then what I know now, type talking about yourself, and what would you what would you go back to, or what would you say to yourself if you could?
Mhm.
And how do you try to incorporate that into what you do now? Because like I'm quite sure you're drawing completely from that, your own experience.
Yeah, for sure. I would say back to the final answer of kind of your question before is teaching athletes how to take responsibility for themselves, right? So I from a coaching standpoint, a coach, should have information that he can give to an athlete, right, to their player, at the right time. So that's kind of a skill in of itself, right? Of like
Right.
in how
Sure.
to give that information, and what's my approach and my tone and how I approach that specific player. Um, but yeah, it's I would say, the first thing that comes to my mind, like what if I just didn't listen to what coach told me that one day, my second day in the big leagues, and just said, because a lot of coaches, well, you can listen to coach what he tells you, and if it's not for you, just let it go, like in one ear out the other, right?
Mhm.
uh, that could have been a thing. And that's when I look back and kind of in my personal conversations with my wife, like that would kind of come up with like, well, what if you didn't, you're kind of speculating, right?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Well, I was like, well, I would have, I went to the big leagues that day, like extremely high confident player. And then I don't know if it was what it was, but I allowed that to just evaporate so quickly with just like a change in some words and some mechanical things, where I, like, all of a sudden I just didn't believe what he was telling me. And so I myself made it this huge deal, right, internally. So anytime I was like, well, if I fail, well, he told me this information, so that's on him. And that was, but I also knew when I was doing it at the time, that's not right. That's not true. Right. So
Yeah,
that
right.
was my internal battle of kind of going back and forth of like, and so, and so I did that for a few years. Right. Well, he told me to do
And
it this way, and I want to please him and make him happy. But is that right?
yeah, and I think too, like baseball in general is there's probably a lot more of this out there in baseball at all levels, professionally even, where guys are just the mental aspect of this game is so hard to get your brain around, right? And so I think you still see it. I think it's way more prevalent than most people even realize, because everything we're talking about is human nature, right?
Of course.
And whether you're a baseball player or whatever it is you're doing, just because you play baseball doesn't mean that those same things don't occur. And in fact, because of the difficulty of the game, it's probably 10 times worse. So, these conversations fascinate me. And I just really appreciate you coming on, being so open about them, and knowing that these are things that happen. You can turn it into something good. You can let it eat you up forever, or you can do something about it and turn it into a positive. I think you've done that, so I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it and pointing that out. Yeah, and that's where, in the kind of to wrap the story up a little bit. That's where, and I've been with my wife since I've been in high school, since I was 15, so she kind of knows me better than anybody. And after, I don't know, I think my last year was 2009. So just kind of knowing, like, sometimes I'll get really quiet and get over analytical, overthink things, and she's like, and I have baseball nightmares
Well,
all the time. All the time. But and it's always about like being late. I forgot my belt, my socks, and I was never late like one time in my
oh, that's crazy.
professional career. So I have this thing where I have all these nightmares, and then when I'm actually in a game, I am the worst player you've ever seen. Right? It's really interesting. Probably need to see some therapists about that, um, but my wife was like, she's like, "Do you still like carry all this stuff?" And I'm like, "Babe, I think about that every day." Like, kind of more like that specific day. What if I didn't? If I just kind of like said, "Screw you, coach. I'm going to do my own thing." Like, what could have happened, right? If I would have just
Sure.
if I had that 6-for-7 game or 7-for-8 game, like I did that first 2 games in rookie ball. But then I was like, dude, get out of the past, right? It's over. It's done. Like, get over it. And that's why it's still kind of hard for me to come on podcasts like this and talk about it, because the last thing I want is to think like I kind of made my excuse internally in a way, like, well, it's because of that day. That's why I sucked in the major leagues, And so that after a while, you're like, dude, screw that. Like, just be done with that. Like, that's not going to help you at all. Then I started thinking, well, what can I do to make this a positive? Right. And I have 4 kids myself. Like, I love kids. I feel like I'm a kid myself in kind of that regard. And so, yeah, like, almost a couple years away from 50, and I probably have more fun in lessons than these kids do. Like some of these kids are so serious. But it turned into, like, when I was scouting, my wife was like, hey, take a listen to this podcast when you're out on the road. And it was just called the Life Coach School. And I kind of heard of coaching before and stuff like that. I was like, sure, I'm bored just driving in my car. And so just started listening to the material, and just kind of, there's a whole model behind it, but just kind of the way we think about all these circumstances in our life and how it can affect us in the way we feel about ourselves, what we do, and kind of the results that we get. And I'm like, dude, this makes total sense to me. So I took that a whole step further, and then, like, went to the school, did an online coaching whole thing, the certification. And that was kind of after the fact, when I was already coaching kids on the mental game. So I added that to my coaching tools, if you will. So, like, the first thing I do with kids, I teach them this specific model, and which basically shows them how they can understand how they're reacting to all the circumstances in their life and in the game, and how to get their power back, and just understand, like, dude, this is all on you. Like you're playing the victim, right? So that's my story. Like, I felt like I played the victim in some of those moments, not the whole time, but I let it creep in, which we probably all do, right? With just life in general. But you start to learn, you're like, dude, that is not the way to go about it, right? And so you start to really, I guess, when you have your awareness of yourself, right? Because to me, it's all awareness. Once you're aware, then you're like, okay, now I can start to kind of work on myself. So I think that's what lacked, in the 2000s. But now you're seeing every major league team has mental coaches. They're there, right? They've seen that there's a problem, that we're all just humans trying to perform at a very high level, and they're making a ton of money. There's a lot of pressure. But it's funny because now, like, I work with the kids, right, and do hitting lessons and coach these kids online. It's kind of like they're in the big leagues of their life right now, right? They're in their 12U All-Stars, and it's such a big deal. And parents are spending all this money on club ball and travel, and so they feel it. Like, they kind of feel the same thing in maybe a different way, but in their 12-year-old brain.
Yep.
So they're all stressed out and don't know how to work through their thoughts and their emotions, about everyting. So
social media too.
Yeah. We talked about that briefly, and it's a whole different thing. And, but yeah, so I've taken that and just created my mental edge coaching business. And so, like, the last, what happened when I scouted for the Angels for 8 years, and then got furloughed when COVID hit. And so now I was just like, well, crap, what am I going to do now? So I actually started my podcast too, Mental Edge Training Coach, and started interviewing kind of all my former teammates and players and coaches, and just started talking about their stories, their mental game, like, how did they approach it? What did they do? And just more stuff that allows more dialogue and more conversation about it. And that's turned into my coaching business, where I'm coaching kids all over the country. So it's been fantastic. And we work together for about 6 to 8 calls, online through Zoom. And I have I teach them different tools on how to handle that. We have coaching conversations about what's going on in their life. And so it's like life coaching / mentorship, a lot of different things involved. And you'd be shocked at how many parents I'm working the same process through it.
Sure.
A lot of times they, in their unawareness, that a lot of times they're the problem. When a kid's really feels a lot of pressure with that stuff. So it's good. I'm happy with where I'm at.
You're to be respected, Chad, because you definitely turned it into something great. Somebody told me a long time ago, the number of players that have ever made it to the major leagues wouldn't even fill Yankee Stadium. You're still one of the very best to ever do it.
Yeah, I think it's like 23,000 ever.
Yeah, it's really crazy when you think of it like that, and the exclusive club it really is. Even the common baseball cards are up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I had to get over my own little personal thing about that too, and all my buddies and the people you love close, like they would kind of point that out, and it's so true. So you're like, I had this thing where I feel like, well, yeah, dude, but I wanted to play 10, 15 years in the big leagues and set my family free, for generations and just kind of live that life and, go travel the world and play golf and just do all those things. And now fast forward, I don't know, 25 years later, whatever we're at now. And I'm like, I've been married to my wife for 25 years. I have 4 kids who are just amazing. And I'm like, what else could I really ask for? Right. So it's kind of, it changes perspectives.
Perspectives, everything, man. That really is.
So it's kind of fun, just as you guys feel the same way, maybe like as we just get older and you just kind of gain more knowledge and information and you learn how to let things go, right, that were kind of bogging you down in the past. And so it's that's about life, right?
Right. I mean, in my case, that was an ex-wife, but I get it.
Right.
But anyways, Chad, great. Thank you so much, man. Super appreciate it. We're going to take another break, and we're going to say goodbye to Chad. And when we come back, it'll just be Jim and I yapping about baseball.
All the best, Chad.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum. We've already run long, Jim, but that was an awesome talk with Chad Hermansen. You're going to listen to it later, and you're going to be like, oh, my God, that would have been fun to talk about, too. I wish I had been there for it.
Gary, don't piss me off any more than I already am.
I love it, man.
You should have seen me sitting here just fuming about this. So yeah,
I pictured it a couple times while I was talking to him. I'm like, I'm gonna ask one of those questions Jim brought up right now because I know he's at least gonna want to hear the answer to
it. Right. Yeah, get the question to him somehow, I guess.
Yeah. But anyways, we tap danced our way through it. It was pretty good. I thought it was a great interview.
Well,
I love hearing stories from guys like that because, man, that's cool.
Yeah, he man. Chad, Travis, these guys, I think they really give us a peek into like the human aspect of it. And to me, that's always a really interesting part because these guys are people trying to play a really hard game. And how does that affect you? What do you learn from it? So on and so forth. We're better baseball fans because we get to hear these guys, I think.
I love it. So talking about being better baseball fans, I'm gonna tell you what, man. We're about to have a blast this weekend if the rain holds out because Paul Skenes is making his major league debut this Saturday for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
I heard that was the case. I maybe stumbled across it here or there.
It's pretty cool, man. I think it's a great story. I don't think they expected Jared Jones to be as good as he is, as early as he has, and I wouldn't be surprised if this changed their mind a little bit on how they handled Paul Skenes. They may have decided, yeah, you know what, screw it, let's just do it.
No, I think what what could you possibly do with a guy that is performing like this in the minor leagues?
Right.
You can get into all the GM speak you want to, but at some point, you've got to just pull the trigger.
Yeah, the boxes were checked, and he's good, and I think we all. I don't think him being ready was the problem. I think the starting rotation performing kind of made it a little bit more of a difficult conversation, right? I mean, like,
isn't it crazy how that worked out though? Like
it's
from when we preseason, what we thought was the concern.
it really is, like I mean, I expected him to force the issue. I expected him to be basically fighting his way through a wet paper towel to get here. And really it was a little bit more than that. Quinn Priester, yeah, he had not a great outing his last time, but young kid trying to get his footing, a number one pick himself, up there playing with a phenom, Jared Jones, who we talked about. Paul Skenes is going to have a hard time living up to him. I mean, like, think about that.
Right. Which is imagine ever saying that and not being laughed out of the building before the season
thing is,
started.
I can sit here right now. I can tell you, if I look at the two of them side by side, and you told me right now you have to pick one of these to start your franchise with, knowing what you know that Jared Jones can do, and knowing what Paul Skenes, you think he can do, because you haven't seen him do it at the major league level yet. It'd be hard not to pick Paul Skenes. Physicality alone. He looks like he should be more sturdy. It looks like it's not as foregone a conclusion that his elbow is going to fall apart, right?
Sure.
Well, but Jared Jones has done things nobody's done. He's setting records in baseball. So it's really hard to look at Paul and expect him to come up and do that same thing, right? I don't know that I can expect him to have 50 strikeouts in 8 games.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're, so I am really looking forward to Saturday. I just want to see what it looks like. And, but now people are going to start comparing, right? There's going to be some comparisons going on. And what I would just caution people and fans is, if Paul Skenes is even close to matching what Jared Jones has done so far, that is a huge win. It's not a negative. That's a huge win, both for Paul Skenes and for the Pirates. So try to enjoy it if we do get that game in, because I think he's going to be pretty special.
What do you think we should expect from Paul Skenes, though? Do you think we're looking at a guy that's going to come up here and just look like, again, he's overmatching the talent, or do you expect major league hitting to kind of surprise him a little bit?
Well, I think the K's will be there regardless, just the way the game is structured today. I think he's going to look pretty settled in. I question with how much we'll actually get to see him. Maybe it might even not even be a particularly long start, but I think he's going to look fine, even if he got somehow touched up in the game. Those numbers won't bother me. I think he'll still look every bit the part.
Yeah, I would think he would too. Now, who do you think they send out for him, and how do you think they handle this? Because he needs a 40-man spot. I think that's part that a lot of people kind of forget, because it's been such a foregone conclusion that he's going to come up all year that I think a lot of people forget he's not even at that stage of the roster. So it's going to require a spot. They can get that the easy way by moving Baraki or Gonzalez to the 60-day. If either of them apply for it, which I don't believe we know officially yet.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything on that.
I've
other
heard,
than,
but they don't know yet. So supposedly we're in the wait and see territory. I would think 60-day would probably be safe with both of them, but that's one option. They could cut somebody, and offensively, I know you want Tellez at England beat Tellez.
Yeah, I don't think that's even
But
in
I
their
think
thought process.
Palacios is on that table as far as somebody they could potentially get rid of. And Rowanzi Contreras is somebody that I think takes care of both problems. It gets you the 26-man spot and it gets you the 40-man spot. So I could easily see it being Rowanzi Contreras. But I guess we're going to find out pretty soon, probably by the time this comes out on audio, right?
Yeah. I really wonder if they do have if their inclination at this point is to say, okay, with Rowanzi, I'm guessing they'd much rather prefer to go the whole Marco / Baraki route, but like you said, we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, and I mean, we can get into how this doesn't fix the offense. I think let's make this a show for just kind of celebrating the event. Let's talk about the rotation real quick, how it could look. We're going to have Jared Jones, Paul Skenes, Mitch Keller, Martin Perez. That seems pretty settled. They're either going to decide to keep Quinn Priester for a little bit and let him have a little bit of a run and move Bailey Falter to the bullpen, or send down Quinn Priester and let Bailey Falter stay in the rotation. That seems pretty clear to me that those are the options on the table, right?
Sure.
No matter what, we're old. We already were talking to Chad about how old we were, right? That's the best rotation that I can picture in my head since 91.
Yeah. I mean, well, we're old, but we're not old enough to remember anything prior to that. So
and it's the Pirates, so they don't have it.
Well, yeah, sure, not in our lifetime for sure.
Right.
But
there was that Babe Adams rotation that was.
Yeah, with the Allegheny Hilltoppers back in the 1870s. But no, and that's really kind of, to me, like the all I want to see is, like, you started Jared Jones in the beginning of the season. You're bringing up Paul Skenes now. The rotation's looking pretty good. See this through as this keeps going. Like, let's not try to be half pregnant here. So that's kind of looking down the road a little bit, but that's where I'm at.
That's good stuff. I think it's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Expect the baseball world to be all eyes on Pittsburgh for a minute here with Jared Jones and Paul Skenes. That if magazines were still a thing, you would see those swirling in like you do in the movies when they're doing a montage of how somebody gets famous.
Yeah, it's bigger than Pirates. It's bigger than it is a baseball story. So I'm going to try to enjoy it from that aspect for once.
It is, and it's going to be a social media story too, because that girlfriend of his is an absolute star. I mean, she's everywhere, and she'll be here, and it's going to be all over the place. So get used to it. And if you're one of those curmudgeons that can't stand looking at Taylor Swift every once in a while in a football, get used to it, because there are going to be pictures of Livy left and right.
I mean, if it's shirtless drunk guy in section 302 or Taylor Swift or Livy Dunn, well, I mean, I don't think we have to make much of a choice there.
Yeah, it isn't exactly like a prison camp, is it? So,
no.
I think it's all right. But hey, all in all, Jim, good show. Sorry you missed part of it. I'm sure
that's
it'll be
okay.
fine.
I'm sure you handled it like a pro, and that was awesome.
You'll enjoy it when you get to it. Yeah, but Chad Hermansen, everybody, check out what he does. He does have a podcast that he hasn't been keeping up with recently, but there's some really good stuff in there, and he talked to some pretty cool players along the way. And talking to Chad really got me like talking to some other former Pirates, because a lot of them kind of reached out after that. So, don't be surprised if we start talking to some guys like Craig Wilson and, Jeff Locke and people like that are starting to reach out now a little bit. That could be fun. Maybe in the off season, we'll do like a 90s Pirates reunion or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right. Hey, good stuff, everybody. And
Thanks, everybody.
let's toss it off to the big guy.
Let's go, Bucks!
Yeah, buddy.